I'm Brian Lilly. Fighting elections using extorted money. That is the topic of tonight's Byline. Progressives love spending other people's money. It's why they love the per-vote subsidy for political parties. You don't need to convince people your ideas are good and that they should part with their hard-earned money. Heck no. No, you get the tax man to pull it from our pockets so they can have it. Well, just because that's on the way out the door doesn't mean that fighting elections with money taking from other people is going to end. We still have the labor movement, and unions in this country are gearing up in a big way to fight the October campaign. From a story on the union-funded left-wing news site Rabble, between 500 and 600 union activists met in Toronto this weekend to talk strategy for the upcoming federal election. Similar events are being hosted across the country as part of the Canadian Labour Congress's election preparedness campaign. And boy, are they preparing. Just look at this list on the website of the Canadian Labour Congress. You've got Edmonton, you've got Moncton, Windsor, Hamilton, Ottawa. It goes on and on. They're training activists across the country with one goal in mind: defeat Stephen Harper and the Conservatives. Now, even though union leaders admit that many of their members vote for the Conservatives in large numbers, that's still their goal. Here's what CLC President Hassan Youssef is quoted as saying in that same article: "We did the most comprehensive survey of our membership. And that's not you in the room. That's the unengaged membership, the ones who don't show up in meetings. And here's what our unengaged members are saying. They think that for the most part, Stephen Harper has done a reasonable job." The article goes on. Despite the labor movement's long-standing affiliation with the NDP in this country, Youssef explained many union members have voted for Harper in the past and would potentially do so again because they believe he has helped Canada weather the 2008 financial crisis. Well, heaven forbid that unionized workers vote for someone that they think has done a good job. They need to be voting left, gosh darn it. It's interesting, though. The CLC isn't calling for a full backing of the NDP. Again, don't take my word for it. Let me quote Rabble again. Though all the conference speakers noted their support and endorsement of Tom Mulcair and the NDP, emphasis was placed squarely on election issues than party allegiance. What does that mean? What are they going to do? Well, they're going to back whatever candidate they think can beat the Conservatives. Essentially, what we will see federally is a repeat of the Ontario campaign, where unions spent big time to defeat Tim Hudak and the PCs. Newly released numbers on third-party election spending shows that unions spent $7.5 million during the 2014 Ontario campaign. Almost all of that was spent with one goal: defeating the Conservatives. Now, that $7.5 million, that's one province. Let me explain how big that is. Registered political parties in Ontario, they're only allowed to spend 80 cents per elector. That is the provincial maximum. Elections Ontario puts the number of potential electors at 9,248,764, at least in the last campaign. So you multiply that by 80 cents per elector and you have a spending cap of $7,399,000. So the union spent more than any single party was allowed to spend. All third-party spending totaled $9 million. In an analysis done by the group Working Canadians, they found that unions were the only ones to spend more than $100,000 in the campaign. Now, some of you might think, well, this can't happen at the federal level. We've got bans on union donations. There's third-party spending limits. But let me tell you, it can happen. It will happen. The federal election is scheduled for October 19th, 2015. Before the election is officially called, any spending done by unions on political issues doesn't count. So over the summer, we can expect lots of ads like this one that was aimed at Tim Hudak.
Tim Hudak will say anything to get elected. He says he'll protect working people, children, and seniors. But Hudak knows his plan hands out tax breaks to wealthy corporations. Tim Hudak says Ontario PCs have a jobs plan, but Hudak knows his plan cuts 100,000 jobs. He even admitted it himself. We can't trust Tim Hudak and the Ontario PCs with our future.
We're going to see ads like that paid for by the unions aimed at Stephen Harper. There's also the fact that unions, if they are only speaking to their members, can spend as much as they want. Expect millions upon millions of dollars to be spent sending flyers, emails, making phone calls to union homes. Unions can also set up get out the vote campaigns that only target progressive voters and still be within the law. They can and will pay for their members to go and work on the local campaigns of selected left-wing politicians. Most union members may not back this, but like Yusuf said, plenty of union members vote Conservatives. Doesn't matter. Doesn't matter if they like the job Stephen Harper is doing. None of that matters. What matters is that the union bosses have a political agenda and access to millions of dollars that workers have no legal right to deny their union, even if it goes against the workers' own political views. Unions like to claim they're about the workers. They aren't. They're about the union bosses and implementing their political agenda. We need reform of this situation. We need to stop forced collection of union dues for political purposes, and we need to stop with the laws that favor unions and their bosses over the rights of individuals. We need that reform, and we need it now. And that's the byline. All right, tonight's top story, unions show no restraint when it comes to election spending. The stats you've seen show that unions spend almost $7.5 million during the Ontario election. They were also the only ones to spend more than $100,000. Catherine Swift is from Working Canadians, the very group that helped organize and analyze these staggering figures. Catherine, welcome to the program again. I thought it was going to be big. I did not think it was going to be $7.5 million that unions spent in the Ontario election campaign.
Well, I wasn't that surprised. We saw the 2011 election campaign, and there was a pretty large-scale advertising effort then. But in this last one, I mean, you couldn't turn a television on without seeing expensive ads, like in prime time and so on. So I knew it was going to be more. Apparently, it was almost half again as much more as the 2011 election, and I thought that was bad. So yeah, the numbers are very, very big, and it just goes to show you, if the bottom line is, and you alluded to it in your opening statements there, Brian, they have too much money. They have way too much money, and it's being spent without the permission of their members.
Okay, let's bring up the chart showing who the big spenders were. Working Families, that is a coalition of unions. They spent $2.5 million. The Ontario English Catholic Teachers Association, 2.2, but hold it just there. They also gave $250,000 to Working Families. Exactly. So they're actually up at about $2.5 million. The Elementary Teachers Federation of Ontario, $1.3 million. Ontario Nurses Association, $687,000. Ontario Secondary School Teachers Federation, $386,000. Are you noticing the pattern here? I know you are, but for people at home, these are all the public sector unions that then turn around and get cushy contracts from the people they helped elect.
Well, this is really the one of the scary parts of this. First of all, unions shouldn't be permitted to spend money on elections like this. They're not permitted this in any other jurisdiction in the country during that period just before an election. You mentioned federally, there's no question they're absolutely going to be advertising outside of that writ period because they're not allowed to do it that close to the election. But that being said here, unions in Canada are unique in the world. They have these dues that are forced, whether people want to pay them or not. They can spend them however they want willy-nilly, as well as put gobs of money into paying people to go out to canvass for the candidate they're directed to. And I've heard from many individuals saying, I don't want to do this, I don't agree with this, but I have no choice. But the public sector part of it is probably the part that irks me the most, and by the way, should irk all Canadians, because here's the money that we pay in our taxes to what are usually overpaid government sector workers with big pensions and early retirements and all those goodies. And basically speaking, it makes our government more expensive overall for all of us. And of course, this is what happened in the Greases and the Detroits and all those other places that we see going bust. Ontario is not in good economic shape right now. We know that. And having a bloated government that is very beholden to the unions is costing us all a fortune.
Well, and why have election spending limits if you're going to have all these groups come out, spend even more than the parties are allowed to spend, with one goal, and that's attack Tim Hudak and the Conservatives. In the federal election, it would be attack Stephen Harper and the Conservatives. And then, well, the Liberals don't have to spend a penny on negative advertising. It can all be glowing things about Kathleen Wynne, or I think we're going to see later on, if the unions do repeat Ontario at the federal level, you're just going to see Justin Trudeau smiling and how great he is because they won't have to run ads saying anything negative about Stephen Harper.
Yes, I think, well, you're absolutely right. I mean, the Working Families Coalition in Ontario is known as the attack dog. They can go out and be ugly and negative, and then the government doesn't have to do that. They can just be all sweetness and light, like you say, and I have full expectation of that happening at the federal level as well.
So,
I personally believe no one, including corporations, I think there should be strict limits on all spending for all groups, third parties. The political parties already have pretty firm caps.
And there's a pretty big debate about that, but courts have already ruled a guy named Stephen Harper challenged the spending limits before he was prime minister, and the courts ruled, they said no, they can stand. But let me ask you about this. The unions wouldn't be able to spend as much if it weren't for forced dues.
Precisely.
The RAND formula that they all rely on says that you must pay for the administration of your contract. There's nothing in the RAND formula that says you must pay so that we can spend millions on political. So shouldn't that be done away with? We got to end on that last 30 seconds to you.
Yes, you're absolutely right. And I think there should be a court challenge, because if you go back to the original RAND decision, which was back in the 1940s, you're absolutely right. It was for collective bargaining purposes, not this political claptrap. So I think we need a Supreme Court challenge and do away with this.
All right. Well, maybe someone will take you up on that offer. Catherine, good talking to you.